The first item is the approval of the July 6, 2010 committee minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Item number 3 is the consideration of the estoppel certificate agreement for the Conference Center Marriott.
You have a memo from Eric and myself discussing very briefly what this is. From time to time, the owners of the hotel refinance their property in different ways. There was one case, I think, in 2006 where they actually restructured the ownership rather than doing just a refinancing. And typically when one of those refinancings occur, the new lender wants to have something from us saying that all of the agreements that we have with them for catering, for management of our property, the conference center, will stay in place. And if you noticed on most of these paragraphs that are in here, they just identify the various agreements. And under the very last item, number 10, I believe, 10B, it basically says that we attest to the fact that so long as any new owner that comes in will operate in the same pattern and manner that the existing ownership does, that we'll agree to continue these agreements. This has been routine during my tenure. I think we've done it twice already. It appears to be fairly typical, and we recommend, staff recommends that we go ahead and approve adopting this certificate subject to our legal counsel's approval. She has not had a chance to absolutely go through this. I am told that the county will adopt this on September 13th. So both parties are required.
And basically you said this, as far as we can determine at this point, it leaves all the business relationships exactly as they were.
No better and no worse. I mean, we still operate under the same agreements that we have since, I think, 1998.
Move approval.
Second.
Recommendation to, or motion to recommend approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
I want to hurry up and get to this water budget.
That's right.
Excited.
That's the big one. I guess number 4 is review and discussion of the 2011 water wastewater.
I'll just hand it off to Mark here in just a minute, but as you remember, last year we did a 2-year budget and a 5-year financial plan. So we're returning for the second year of the budget, and what we told you then and what we're doing now is we will amend that budget to reflect the reality now and what we're looking at. And so what we're bringing forward to you today is that updated budget, and we've added the new 5th year to the 5-year plan, and then updated the 5-year plan to also reflect the expenditures and experiences that we've had over the last year, and updated the budget to reflect that. So that's what we're doing. That's what this is. And really what we have experienced is what we hope to get out of this budget and this financial planning process a year ago, which is a utility that is self-sufficient, that carries its own way in terms of expenses and revenues in sync. That happened. It didn't quite happen exactly as we thought it would a year ago, but it happened. And what we experienced was less revenue than we thought, but also we controlled expenditures in a way that we kept those in sync. So that is a good news, and something that we will work to continue to bring forward to you. This budget reflects what we think it takes to operate the utility over this next year, and what we project it to look like over the next 5. What will come later is a companion of the update of the rate study. We don't expect that to be significantly different than what we looked at a year ago, but you don't have that in companion with this budget yet. But we expect that to be forthcoming. But that's a little bit different discussion in that this is what it costs to run the utility. The rate discussion is a little more along the lines of how do you divide that bill up among your different customer categories. So I think while it might be nice to have the rate study with it, it doesn't make it impossible for us to look at the budget. And so that's what we'll do today, is talk about budget and know that the rate study is coming forward. I think we'll have a question for you about how you want to handle the rate study, whether it comes back to this committee or right to the whole board, or how you want to do that, will be an open issue that we can discuss when we get into the question and answer period. So I'll let Mark kind of take you through everything on the components of the water plan. So.
If I could ask a question about the
Yep.
rate study, will Jackson Thornton come and present? So
Yes.
maybe it might seem a little easier if they came and presented to the whole board rather than coming twice.
That was sort of our thinking, that
We paid
that was sort of
twice.
a whole board discussion last year anyway, so
Twice.
we might bring it, yeah, we might bring it then.
I think I could suffer through one presentation.
Yeah, and it's not a whole lot different than, we don't expect it to be a whole lot different than where we were. There are a few issues we're going to bring up. I think Mark in particular wants to look at how we handle the meter charges and how that issue gets dealt with. That may be an issue to look at, maybe have a longer term discussion on that issue too, we don't know. But I think that would make sense. Now, we don't think we'll have all that information till
End of September is
Yeah,
when
so
we're looking to.
the second meeting in September is probably when we would do that, if you want a full board. I don't know that we'll be ready for the 14th of September. We're probably looking at the 28th. So, but again, I think that's okay.
But we can pass this without that.
You could do that, and the rate part isn't planned to take effect until January 1 anyway. That's sort of been our pattern anyway when we do that. So I think you can keep that moving, or you can, if you're not comfortable, you can, the budget, we could continue to work with that too, so, in terms of timing.
Had proposed in the financial plan from last year a series of 3 rate increases. And we don't, at this point, look to vary from that path as we stand right now. Granted, we had lower revenues this year due to just lower consumption. We think economic environment was a large driver in that. So we don't want to respond to that too quickly and adjust rates and then have the economy rebound in some fashion in which we're way over recovering costs. So we're going to propose to go down the path that we had originally laid out over this 3 years. And again, this is a continuous process. Every year we'll be coming back to you and bringing you up to date as to where we are in terms of revenues versus expenditures. So we don't want to, we're trying not to respond very quickly to the lower revenues from this year. And as Eric had mentioned, we had evaluated our expenditures pretty closely throughout the year to ensure we came in at a reasonable expenditures total. So
I had one comment as I was reading through this, it's on the rates, and that is that whenever we were talking about the rate structure, one of the comments, and I definitely still feel that way, that the rate inside versus the rate outside ought not to just depend or mainly depend on the cost of providing services, because there's a lot of difference in allowing people who are outside the city limits to have, especially wastewater service. I mean, that's worth a lot more to them than just the cost of service. And I think that needs to be factored in there. I think whenever we made the changes over the last 2 or 3 years, we kind of narrowed the gap between rates inside and rates outside, and I know it was being looked at in terms of cost of providing, but really it is worth a lot more to those people. We're inside, we're obligated, if they're in our service district, to provide it, but we are not obligated outside our service district, and outside our city limits, and I think that ought to be, that ought to show up in that difference.
Well, that'll be part of the policy discussion.
That's right.
And those
Well,
classes
I'm
of
just saying-
customers, how you deal with that.
I'm just saying to you that I want you to think about that as you are putting that together, because it's not just they're on an equal footing with the people
Of
that
course.
live inside the city.
yes.
There.
Because to add to that, those people on the outside, if that's going to be a normal process, that we will extend sewer to them, and they'll be outside the city, we also have to look at future capacity and what the cost that will be to us, because, we can plan for capacity within urban growth boundary, but as we if we start extending that past those areas, that's going to add to more of our capacity and more of the cost.
And we've just done
And-
that.
And they should bear a significant part of that, because without additional things, perhaps we wouldn't have to expand capacity so much. And that's reasonable.
It will certainly be a consideration.
So are we ready to just
We'll let
start
Mark
on it?
kind of walk you through the explosive water plan.
Much of my intro.
I'm sorry, I hit some highlights, but you can repeat the important message as we learned earlier today.
Yes, that is important. You know, much of this it follows the document that was presented to you all last year. And we've provided some updates throughout the narrative, describing some of the things that have occurred over the past 12 months. And we can get into the details of as much of it or as little of it as you like. But the introduction, of course, is very similar to last year's. We again are presenting this budget in 3 sections. The water, wastewater, and reclaimed water sections versus the divisions that we had in previous years. We had 7 divisions, so we're trying to fold everything up and make it a document that's more manageable.
And we really look at each of those as the separate utility.
We do.
Entity unto themselves. So that's the other part of why that makes sense
Right.
to us,
We-
to look at it that way.
Let me ask you, is it just one fund, though? I've forgotten that. Or is
There's
it?
3
That's
separate
what I thought,
funds.
there were
Yes,
3
ma'am.
separate funds.
Yep, and-
Really,
Yes.
so really they do.
Fund and
stand-
utility, that sort of matches up that way.
That's
yeah.
right, but that's really the way they're set up,
We're
too.
we're balancing the
Okay.
3 separate funds, or attempting to balance the 3 separate funds. If you go to page 2, please, just looking at some of the goals and initiatives we had started getting into last year. One of the concerns for us had been the cross-connection control program. We had struggled with that over the past handful of years, and eventually last year brought it in-house, and we have received a lot of positive comments from our customers in that being more responsive. We've been striving to improve customer service, and we were noted as improving tremendously in our recent sanitary survey. So we've
Say
Mm-hmm.
that, say that grade.
Give us a number, say it.
98
98.
out of 100, yes. So so we were very pleased with that. There's still some work to be done that they had noted, but we are heading definitely in the right direction. Valve exercising, which is another program that we're trying to start off, and this is a managed, scheduled program. We've not physically, we of course are going out and exercising valves, but we're still stepping through the planning process for that and anticipate doing that this coming year and cycling through our system on a regular frequency. So we have the valves out there to manage flows as we need them. Our leak detection program, last year, if you recall, we identified about 44 million gallons, I think the number was, of annual water loss in a section of town in the Grassland area. We had proposed to start doing that over a 5-year process, look at every pipe in the city in our service area over a 5-year period. With the success of what we saw last year, we have stepped that schedule up. We're looking at doing a 2-year cycle initially, and then stepping back to 5 years. The reason we're doing 2 years and not the entire system is it takes 2 to 3 of our staff members, coordination with the contractor, to go out and work on this. And we were hesitant to commit that level of staff for as long as it would take to do so. So that's why we've kind of settled in on a 2-year. Again, we're looking at our ordinances and specifications. We're currently going through specifications right now in cooperation with the engineering department. And then, of course, cost recovery, we're continuing to step through that with our cost of service analyses. And then depreciation and cash reserve, that's all kind of folded into the cost of service analyses as well. We want to make sure we have a cash reserve as we've proposed 25% of our operating expenditures on hand. We have been performing many projects in the city, as you can tell by the equipment rolling around town. Southeast water improvements are, the line work is all complete in that area. There's a couple of minor projects that need to happen down the road, but as far as serving that area, the majority of the infrastructure is in place, with the exception of a booster station we anticipate to be installed in November of this year. Raw water reservoir, the mayor got me on something earlier today. He won a gentleman's bet, I suppose, on how a certain portion of the project was going to be constructed. However, that project is moving along well, and the latest report that we received from the inspectors was 80%. I think we're a little over 80% of it lined right now, so that's progressing well. We love it when it rains in the water industry, but unfortunately for this project, it's posed some
downside of
problems. Downs Boulevard transmission main, that's a 24-inch transmission main that's being installed from almost 96 West to Columbia, and that project is currently underway, and sort of the sister project to that was reclaimed water lines being installed in that area as well, so that's progressing well. If you move down to page 4, we look at our water revenues, and I guess I'd like to highlight the table at the bottom. It gives a snapshot, a history back to 2006 up to FY 2010 of our revenues and consumption. As you can see, the bottom portion of the table shows percent change. So you can see our consumption has gone down over the years. And again, I think a large driver to that has been the economic environment. We also have been kind of stepping up our conservation program, and the conservation program to us is more geared towards irrigation consumption in the summertime that is not needed. Of course, we understand that people invest money in their lawns and their landscaping, and we recognize that it's important to them and it's important to the community. But we want people to do it in a conscientious manner. So that's the part of the purpose of our program, and we like to think that it has some impact on the consumption, but I believe economics is the primary driver to that.
I also said to someone yesterday, it may be after the flood happened, you start thinking in the big scheme of things, what about just keeping my lawn green the whole time is very minor, whenever you think about that. And but also I've heard people, talk about multi-$100 water bills that I don't think people are willing to pay right now in this,
Right.
which goes back to your
Can I
economy.
tell you another reason I think?
Yes, sir.
This is nothing analytical about it, but that, we haven't had any new houses built.
It's true.
Well, that true.
And when you have new houses, you have sod, and you have new
True.
landscaping,
True.
and fresh fescue, and everybody wants to keep that pretty. After a year or two, it turns to Bermuda anyway. And
Mine's about to turn into
No, I'm not really joking, I'm really telling you. And you don't need to water Bermuda, and your garden,
That's
and
much.
your plants look like crap anyway, and so, why spend the money? But on new houses, you really all
You're right,
pump
you
it up.
have to, don't you?
And I think that is probably the main reason.
It's a good
Very good point. Excellent point.
I'm disappointed to hear it wasn't, don't be a water hog.
No.
I'm sure that contributed at some level.
That Bermuda's just gonna take over anyway. I mean, listen, I own a sod farm. I've tried for 5 years to keep Bermuda out of my yard. I've given up. So,
Join the rest of
that's
us.
right,
Gee, that's all.
Well, and fescue is a cool season grass, and when you have a 100-degree temperature in
Hard for it to
June,
grow.
there's even so much water you can pour on it, and
Oh,
still.
yes. Yep.
Well, now let me ask you then, do these projections, do you think that we might want to revise them? Is that what you're saying, that you want to wait for
We're
another year?
we're working with the cost of service consultants on looking at that. At this point, we don't really have new information to provide, so we'd like to keep them as they are at this point in terms of the projections, because, we think that on completion of our analyses, we'll have a better idea of what direction we should go in. And again, the fear of responding quickly to this kind of the economic environment, I don't know, it'd be a bit of a challenge to put numbers that we are very confident in at this point. I don't know if
I would just add that Jackson Thornton does this rate study for a lot of systems, and they'll probably give us some input of what forecast changes
Okay.
other systems are
Okay.
making,
so.
and they probably have a better handle on that really than we do internally.
Yes, so, yeah, that's why we've left them as they are. If you go down to pay, and please stop me at any time.
I'd
Yes, sir.
like to maybe ask a few questions. Go back to the leak detection program, because I
Sure.
know we made a big boom when we found the 40 million gallons, and that's got to have saved us a lot of money. Is money what's holding you back, or is it?
I think it's
There's got to
staffing.
be a cost-benefit ratio there, because
The
40 million gallons of
staffing-
water is a lot of water.
It is a lot of water, and we would be happy to do it. We're concerned about staffing levels because the consultant, or the contractor would be out there for a period of several months at least, and we would then have 3 people no longer, serving under their, or under that, for that project during that time period. And we debated whether or not to attempt to do it all in one shot, and we were a little uncomfortable taking 3 people out of our service crews when, sometimes we like to respond to our calls as quickly as we can, and we don't want to see a drop-off in our ability to serve our customers. I know there's of course that financial benefit to identify these, but when you do identify them, then you're also sending crews out to fix leaks and things. So you're looking at not only the 3 people, you're looking at the crews to address the problems. And it may be something we discuss hiring contractors for, but I don't know if.
When you look at what we've done, though, we've more than doubled the pace of that program from where we were a year ago. And largely because we saw the success that we had here and said, well, let's get this done in 2 years as opposed to 5, and then get on a regular, ongoing, systematic review, so that we're really always doing it. But we'll get through the whole system in 2 years.
Yes.
I don't know when it was done prior to that, but
I think
If
it's been
ever.
a decade or so.
It's been a while.
So
So we're not, we're sort of catching up, and I think we've increased this pace to a point that we're comfortable balancing it with the other operational needs, because it does have operational,
Right.
it does place a draw on our operations to do it, but we think it's the right thing to do, and that's why we've done it, increased the pace at the point we have, so.
And it's probably worth repeating, 275 miles of line. 2 years is pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's,
So really, it's going
So
to be
we-
done faster.
You identified the
instead of
grassland
slow.
area. Was there some reason that was a spec, and are there other areas?
There's some older infrastructure in the grassland area. There's also high pressure, and
Right,
combine the
because
two.
that's where
That's-
Carpet Valley
yeah.
comes in.
Yes. So that was
Okay.
one of the primary drivers to go up in that area. And we'll be prioritizing different areas based on age and things of that nature as we press forward. I think we have I think the next 100 miles or so we've kind of laid out as how we want to do it. But there's reason behind the areas we go in, so, yes.
sorry to hold you.
Oh, you're fine.
No, but I think that's a good one that everybody wants to know about, so I appreciate that.
The other thing you mentioned was the conservation side, and I've got a particular interest in trying to not see irrigation systems going when it's raining.
On May 2nd, 2010, for example?
Oh, gosh.
And
one
and I
last
know that in the background, there's work being done on maybe some type of recommendation to, as far as irrigation systems going forward in the future with more modern technology, or encouraging the use of it. So I hope we'll kind of stay on that track to at least be more
Right.
conservation oriented on it.
Okay. Absolutely. Yes, we've been looking at different methods, and as you said, technologies is improved tremendously in that industry, it seems, and so we'll be continuing to work in that area, and I'm sure the board will be seeing something in the near future on that.
But we currently don't require any extra certification through our plumbing program.
No, sir. And that would all fall under Building and Neighborhood Services and their inspections. And of course, you know, as you start looking into this and doing inspections, you're going to have staff time committed. And so that's, again, a balance to make sure we don't overcommit on certain programs.
Question, Downs Boulevard, the transmission, 24-inch transmission line, have you got an estimate on when that'll be completed?
I do not have I haven't spoken with the project manager. Ballpark? It's going to be the first of the year before that's completed.
By the time the rates increase.
The big driver for at least me is to have Downs Boulevard in operation by next summer. I don't know if you recall or not, but one of the areas that we run into challenges during summertime is the Columbia Pike tank and the Carter Street tank. And this goes to addressing a lot of those issues down there. And of course, with the lining of the reservoir going on right now, we hope that, well, the risk of the plant not operating will be decreased tremendously. So we think both of those projects will help us.
Is that source of that water the 96 tap to
That goes through the Natchez Trace vault. It's a 24-inch line that comes through Natchez
Right.
Trace.
But it's not it's not the Sneed Road, it's the vault on the west side of town.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Is that fed by a 36-inch line?
It's a 24-inch
It's a
line.
24.
Yes,
The tap itself is a 24-inch line.
correct. So you're gonna see a combination of flows going through Downs Boulevard from Sneed and also from Natchez, depending on where your demands are. So they're all interconnected.
Okay.
So the page 5 is the section on.
Go back to
Oh,
4.
sorry.
I know that there's a bookkeeping reason for this transfer of the Springs property that we swapped out with the county for some of the properties. So is that on hold right now to reimburse that, or where are we?
We're paying interest only on the note because of the unusual economic and budget circumstances we've been under for the last 2 years. But we do continue to pay interest from the general fund to the water funds.
It's basically a receivable
Yeah.
within the water fund.
I think Mr. Skinner is referring to, there's a line item in there and it's
Yes.
it's zeroed out, so
It shows
I'm making a note of that right now, and I'll,
It's really a payment. I mean, it may say transfer.
correct.
It's blank because there's no principal payments being made, only interest.
Okay. What's the outstanding amount on that?
You know, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was in the 2 million range. I mean, there's a significant part of that. One of the thought processes as we were going through this over the last 2 years has been the fact that we did not know if any of those properties would be surplused and disposed of. So not knowing how that was going to fall out, that might have changed what was in the agreement.
So we swapped the Springs for the post office and the jail.
In the jails,
The jails that we've declared surplus.
the mini jails,
Yes. All old.
all old, at least old.
And really,
Square.
I can relate to that.
And there was, I guess it's worth throwing in, there was a little sliver of property over by Fort Granger as well, included in that.
Off of Eddie Lane, I think it was.
Yeah, right off of Eddie Lane, so. There were actually 4 properties in all.
So what was over there? It's not the the lumber company.
It's
Right
adjacent
next
to that.
Okay. But that doesn't diminish our access to
Why
future
part of our
access.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we have it. We have it
ours.
now.
But that's not what's up for auction now.
No.
No.
Okay, good. I was about to
That go by?
tangential.
You good so far? Okay,
Right.
page 5. The revenues, current and proposed rates, we've listed the existing rates that were effective in January 2010. Again, we're working with Jackson Thornton on a design of rate structure, again, consistent with the increases we had proposed in the plan from last year. The 2011 and 12 increases, or projected increases to revenue of 7% and 5% respectively, so. Our expenditures, again, in the water section, water purchase is the primary expenditure in operations and maintenance. We had seen numbers exceed $3 million annually. Again, with our decrease in sales, we are about $2.75 million versus 3 and 3.2, that range generally. Personnel, we're not proposing any additional staff members at the water treatment facility nor in water distribution. Operations and maintenance, again, is, the water purchase is a large portion of it. Starting to see some debt service numbers creep in with the state revolving fund projects that we have going on at the water plant, and also the Downs Boulevard transmission main. The operations capital,
Before we go into
Sure.
that, I had a question. We're still okay in terms of the minimum purchase that we have to make for Market Valley, even though it was lower this year?
Yes, ma'am. We operate our plant generally in the wintertime when the minimum purchase comes into play, and we will not treat the water and put it out into the system if we're obligated to buy it already. So we don't want to, of course, pay twice for the same volume of water. So we consider that when we treat the water.
So you got the minimum payment even when you're not using it. That's where it
Right.
comes into play.
Right.
Because the time when we use it, obviously, it's going to well exceed the minimum.
Right. Yeah, we try to consume at least the volume of the minimum payment, regardless of the need at the time. That way we're not kind of double paying,
Sure.
I guess, for water.
Makes sense.
Indirect expenses,
Yes, the indirect.
4,700.
Yes, indirect expenses, the other departments in the city, finance department, administration, human resources, all provided services to us. So that's where that comes from.
Let me ask you this before we get, I know whenever we were talking about, I saw in here the approved budget, 2011, but then I saw the amended budget, 2011. So if we had approved that 2-year, then we had an approved budget. We have an approved budget for 2011, but we haven't approved the amended, have we?
We're coming back to you with an amended
Okay.
11
Right.
at this
Okay.
point, which
Okay.
lowers some,
Right.
primarily lowers
In-
about $200,000.
Okay, just wanted,
Yeah.
at first I thought, what is approved?
That's what we'll ask you ultimately to
Okay.
recommend to the board, and then the whole board to take action on.
Okay.
Right. The, one of the things that, and Russ was very helpful in this area, was operations capital, and we have kind of categorized the purchase of equipment and vehicles and things of that nature. We've done some reviews of really needs, and Russ and Eric both, needs on what we do in our, as a service department and as the treatment facilities. And we've been able to remove some of these purchases because on the way we change operations don't necessarily need. So we've been able to remove certain items. However, there's the base I guess, what are termed as consumer vehicles, such as service trucks and things of that nature. We've had to carry forward a couple of those purchases that we did not make in last year.
Into this budget.
Into this budget, so you'll see some increases in that area. We're working with equipment that's starting to get aged, for lack of a better term. Ken, you don't need to comment on that. The table on page 8 is the expenditures, and you'll see in a column amended budget 2011, and the column to the left is what was in the approved budget from last year. We're very close on the section's total. It's just shy of $100,000 we're requesting an increase in, and that's primarily occurs in the operations and maintenance section, as well as, excuse me, yes, that's primarily
Contractual
that.
services.
Contractual services.
And that is in part is,
The integrated plan.
the integrated water plan is a component of that, yes. Sorry, there was one other thing
And you
that I
got
wanted
debt
to point out.
service.
Yes, there was that.
That's
There
about
was
a
the debt service is
$300,000
about a $300,000 increase.
And that's the state revolving fund.
Correct. In wastewater, again, we had some goals and strategic initiatives, one of which is wet weather evaluation. And you've heard the term I&I thrown around, infiltration and inflow, a number of times. And we saw that during the May flood, where we had flows through our plant were considerable, in excess of 30 million gallons a day. Now, granted, in an event like that, you're going to have large flows enter your system. What we want to do, of course, is minimize the I&I entering our system on smaller rain events all the way up through large. I would hesitate to say you will ever get all of it out of your system. It's, I think, not practical. However, we do want to get it down to a level that's more manageable. That will increase the capacity, the effective capacity of our wastewater collection system, as well as our treatment facility. We are, as you all know, are stepping through our integrated planning, and this is certainly a component of that. And really what the process in doing this is you prioritize sewer sheds or it's kind of a watershed, but in the sewer pipe collection system. Identify those that are the leakiest, if you want to term it that way, that present the most I&I into your system, and then you start doing a rehab or replacement program for each of those different sewer sheds. So the initial goal, I think that's part of the sustainability program, is to identify and prioritize those sewer sheds by the year 2014. So it's a long-term process, requires flow monitoring and things of that nature to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. So that's
Kind of the opposite of conserving, keeping the leaks from the water going out. This is kind of the leaks from the water.
The inverse
coming in.
leak, yes.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but yes. We're also reviewing specifications as we are in the water. We're reviewing our technical specs for water, wastewater, and reclaimed water. And again, the cost recovery and depreciation cash reserve components. The Goose Creek.
So let me ask a
Yes, sir.
terrible question.
Sure.
If we have infiltration, then we probably have the opposite of that in our sewer line.
Exfiltration.
Under pressure.
Generally speaking, if you have, you're going to have a groundwater column surrounding your pipe. So if you do have infiltration, then the sewer system is not pressurized. So exfiltration would be nominal. So if you have a pressurized sewer, example would be a force main. It would be somewhat synonymous with a water pipe. It's a pressurized system. If you have a leak on that pressurized system, you're going to have exfiltration or a leak.
You're saying there's more pressure on the outside of the pipe than
If
the inside of the
if
pipe?
it falls within the groundwater column, yes, sir.
There.
Yes. If the groundwater table goes below
Do most of our
that,
pipes fall within the groundwater table?
some of them are more shallow. Many of them are 10+ feet deep, and in most times of the year, our groundwater will be above that level. or there will be some moisture, some water in there. With it not being a pressurized system, the exfiltration is pretty minimal. If you pressurize that pipe, of course, when you get I&I, some of those pipes will become pressurized. You may experience some exfiltration.
But there'd be no way to measure that.
I think if there's probably a way to do that, I would imagine it would be pretty costly. That's generally not what the industry would do to identify pipes that have problems. There's other methods
Well,
like,
and the reason being is when it leaks there, it just doesn't cost you anything because you don't have to treat it.
that's a good point.
Unless it's a really bad leak. I think you have to see something else.
For those of you at TDEC watching,
What about the hearing, August 31st?
Or you dilute it with infiltrate.
the public hearing on August 31st, I believe, at 6 PM at the rec center up on, just north of Machatcher. I can never remember our discharge permit, National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System discharge permit for our wastewater plant is up for renewal, and it's been expired since 2006. We are lawfully operating under that expired permit, and have been awaiting and working with TDEC over the past several years to get that permit renewed. The public comment period is ongoing. There's a public meeting regarding that, or public hearing on August 31st. So you're certainly welcome to attend. TDEC will be, it's going to be a public hearing for not only our permit, but also for Cartwright Creek and also the Linwood utility districts in the Grassland area, or in Meadow Green area. So they're looking at this reach of the Harbor of the River as kind of a watershed approach, and looking at all of the municipal discharges in one shot. So certainly welcome to attend, provide comment. We will be there and keep you posted on where we are with that. Is there any more questions? Just stepping on through. Okay. Some of the projects that we had done over the past year is completion of the Goose Creek Interceptor Phase 2 project, which brought our wastewater collection system down further into the Goose Creek area. The Berry Farms project and those down into the Stream Valley area. Also the Sharps Branch Rehabilitation Project. Sharps Branch is a small tributary that's in kind of the older part of the downtown area, west of the square. The confluence is actually right across the street at the Harbor of the River from where the water service department is. There's a large interceptor that follows Sharps Branch and then also the Harbor of the River up to the wastewater treatment facility. And that project is one of the few lining projects done here in the city. We anticipate doing more in the future, of course. But it was a great project in that it was an older line. We noted that there was quite a bit of infiltration coming into it, and we're able to line it without doing any digging. And so it was a good project, and that's been completed. Simmons Ridge Interceptor, and that's also in the southeast part of the city, funded through the state revolving fund, is currently under construction. And that's going along with the other wastewater projects and reclaimed water projects as well.
Projected completion of that?
Projected completion, they are currently clearing the alignment right now. I don't have a good date for you. I don't
Not
know.
even ballpark.
Spring of 2012.
There's nothing out there.
I'm going to ballpark on that one.
Okay.
That's
Spring
I
2000.
think that's a conservative. Yes, sir.
But really, that's far.
Right. Currently,
There's
it's
nothing
yes,
out there.
correct. And that's consistent with our master planning efforts that have been done in that area for collection. Again, wastewater revenues, we did again fall short in revenues as well. We did, in terms of what we had projected, we did have a revenue increase from the previous year. However, it was not as significant as we had hoped. sorry, let me get to the table. If you look at the table on page 12, our sales, if you want to call it sales, or the treatment in gallons had gone down by about 100,000, 100 million gallons. Is that correct? Yes. So again, our revenues did go up, but it was a pretty modest increase in revenues. And as with water, we're proposing to take that same approach, finish out our cost of service analyses. And yes, ma'am.
I had just realized, because for so many of us, the amount of money that you get from the sewer is based on our water consumption. So
Yes.
obviously, if
Right.
the water consumption goes down, the sewer
Right.
revenues are going to be
Yep.
down too.
It's also dependent on the sales in the other utility districts, because we
right,
serve the
right.
wastewater in some of Mallory Valley and Millcrofton and HB&TS, so their sales also affects our sales, so to speak, in wastewater.
So it's not just we're watering lawns less, we're flushing less too.
Well,
Right.
no, see, for most of us, if you irrigate, you also have to pay wastewater on
With
that.
unless you have a separate irrigation meter. Yes.
Could also reflect lower commercial usage.
Sales in gallons, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and that's
About 100,000, about what we saved in conservation.
that's in thousands of gallons, so that would be
Oh, okay.
100 million.
100 million.
Yes, sir. We got a lot of wastewater coming through Franklin.
You're right.
We don't need to elaborate on that.
That's right.
And we are using other utilities that are having water coming.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, our footprint as a sewer utility is larger than that of the water.
Don't have any restrictions on our district there, the
Yeah.
way we do on the water.
As far as expenditures, sorry, I got lost here. Okay, again, debt service is a very significant portion
That's number one.
in wastewater. That was due to a plant upgrade in the late 90s, I believe it was, and there was a rebudget, is that the right term, Russ, in 2000?
There was a refunding, I think, in 2002.
2002.
It was originally a $26 million issue, which was a very large sum at that time.
And again, as with water, and we've pushed off some of the operations capital purchases from previous years. We've identified purchases that were not absolutely necessary, and eliminated those from the budget. We are also funding the integrated plan through the wastewater section as well. So you'll see that in the contractual services. We've gone through a number of minor upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility in terms of automation to start to reduce our electrical costs. That's been noted that they exceed about over $1 million annual, and you're certainly welcome to come out there, but there's a lot of equipment, pumps, blowers running for aeration purposes and things of that nature, and always looking to optimize and reduce those costs, electricity being the primary utility cost for the wastewater section. The expenditures are presented on page 15. We are proposing to amend the budget by reducing approximately $400,000. You'll note that the operations capital has gone up, and again, that's because we've been putting off some purchases that we feel that would be difficult to put off further. We did find some efficiencies in the operations side, and the wastewater side, we identified, I think it was 1 or 2 positions that we felt were not necessary at this time to hire. I'm sorry, I don't have that specifically in my head at this point.
I understand you're in the process of doing some evaluation on your electrical usage.
Yes,
Wastewater treatment.
we had started stepping through a process with Tennessee Valley Authority, and it was strange how we started going through it, and the two people that were our contacts are no longer, one of them's no longer with TVA, the other's no longer working for that I guess, service. So we needed to pick it back up, and Andrew, Mr. Orr had commented on it, I think it was about a month ago, and we're going to get back with him and see if we can kind of breathe some more life into it and get it going again. We completed a thermal analyses of some of the processes of the pumps, making sure that they're running efficiently, and a number of other things, but it's, not completed yet, so we need to finish that out and go from there. So. Reclaimed water. Again, we've been working to expand the reclaimed water system. We have reclaimed water that now goes down into the Goose Creek area. That distribution line has not been brought into service for lack of consumption in that area. We, again, have regulatory requirements that are required to meet. One of the drivers to get out there was residential development, as well as a number of other of potential users.
Has Forest Crossing tapped onto that line?
We're kind of going through we've submitted to them a draft agreement at this time and waiting for some comments back, and we're
Has TDEC told them they can't withdraw out of the area?
I don't know the specifics on that. There's two items that are going kind of parallel to each other, one of which is this tie-on with us, and then I think they're settling that issue that they had with TDEC from a couple of years ago. I don't believe they are withdrawing from the river this time, and I'm not sure the details of that, but we've been working with...
Because we should make sure, is TDEC aware that they,
Yes.
that they have affluent capability?
They will have, yes, they're aware that they will have affluent.
Surely they'll say you can't withdraw
Yes, sir.
if you've got affluent.
Because this helps us in two ways, in that we have more water than at the water plant level,
Right.
and we can get rid of...
Forest Crossing is located just upstream of the raw water withdrawal point of the river, and there's obviously that competing need for filling their, they have ponds on site that they irrigate from, so there's the competition of irrigation versus withdrawal for domestic consumption or distribution. So yes, we'll be able to, once we, I guess, settle in on an agreement, be able to provide to them affluent water, and then again pull them off the river and have reduce the effluent discharge to the Harpeth River and reduce the withdrawal from the other point of the river. So it's working out nicely.
When we get the agreement.
Right, and things are going well. They seem to be cooperating well, so it's going nicely.
So the lack of demand in Goose Creek is basically the Boyle properties, String Valley.
Right, I think things have stalled out there. We have it live up to actually the Forest Crossing area, and we've been, again, we have to maintain a certain residuals and chlorine residuals for disinfection, so we maintain down at there, make sure we're flushing it off and maintaining those residuals. The other projects, of course, you saw the purple pipe along Downs Boulevard and also through Jim Warren, so we'll be able to serve our city facilities as well as hopefully some other homeowners associations in that area. I've had a handful of phone calls, and again, one of the other neighborhoods that's expressed interest is Franklin Green, and I need to get back conversations with those folks, and
That would be for their common areas.
their homeowners association area, yes. So I need to pick that conversation back up with them. Our goals is bid, again, the Goose Creek and project, and that's, again, remains offline, and the Downs Boulevard and West Reclaimed lines are currently under construction. The West Reclaimed line is the one that goes through the Jim Warren Park area. The Downs Boulevard, of course, is the one that goes along the alignment of Downs Boulevard.
Well, the obvious area, though, that really needs the reclaimed water is Coon Springs.
Yes, that's, they have a very large irrigation demand out there. Their summer usage is significantly greater than their winter demands. One of the concerns we have, of course, is, we have West Haven and Forest Crossing and the Legends Club. We have a number of industries that have expressed interest along Downs Boulevard. So when you start adding all those potential consumption up for all of those customers, you start looking at a deficit in the supply. So you need to, in the summertime, the wastewater generally is going to be lower because you have your groundwater table starts to tail off. Winter groundwater table's up a little bit, you'll get more I&I, and generally you'll see more water go through the plant. So that you have to balance what you can process through the wastewater treatment facility. There's some need to actually have an effluent discharge to the Harpeth River. We bolster flows when we discharge the Harpeth River, and there is value to that to many people.
I heard that yesterday.
Oh yeah, I guess you. So they're bolstering that. That's right.
You did hear it.
So
More than once.
so you have to really balance what your demands versus how far do you want to expand and how much infrastructure you want to spend money on and really what do you want to put back into the river. So it's and hopefully this process that we're going through with the integrated plan will help us manage that. So let's see the expenditures table on page 18. You'll see an increase of the budget, and again, that is debt service.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
let you go.
No, you're
Additional
fine.
storage facilities are being considered using existing department property.
We have the Long Lane tank, which is a 500,000 gallon tank. There's been the concept of converting that to a reclaimed water tank for use in the Goose Creek area. There have been a number of kind of really high-level studies done over years ago of looking at. We have property across the river from the wastewater treatment facility. I guess just south of Mac Hatcher. There's where I'm just east, I guess, of the bridge on Mac Hatcher.
But not Hardline State, but on.
Right. It's a wholly separate piece of property, and there had been thoughts of using that as potential storage. It's close to the source, so that is down the road many years, we believe. But I wanted to bring it up and just to let you know that we're not thinking about these things. So it was,
Is that floodplain?
portion of it is floodplain, not all of it's floodplain. That would be an interesting, if you produce reclaimed water, you have to chlorinate it. So this would be an interesting permitting process with TDEC, because they wouldn't want you to put a chlorinated product in a floodplain adjacent to a river such that you have a flood, then you'll be pulling. So there's a couple ways that we can maybe introduce a different way to deal with that. Maybe it would be sent over there as effluent, which is what we discharge to the river right now. So you're not changing the product any from what our current effluent is, and then bring it back to the plant for chlorination and distribution. So there's a couple of potential options there, but
Kind of like a wetland.
possibly, yes. It really kind of depends. I guess the more you do, though, of course, you have the dollar signs going up too. So it's we always discussion of plants nowadays of having a wetlands polishing process at the end of it, and that kind of refines the treatment, and so.
And then you could redo it for drinking
I was
water.
going to say, then
Well,
upstream
that's a
of it.
possibility, yeah. Your treatment processes are pretty advanced nowadays. I actually was in a plant, there's a groundwater recharge plant in California that I don't recall the specific numbers, but the wastewater facility treats about 250 million gallons a day. They send it over to the groundwater recharge plant,
Yeah,
run it through the
heard
plant,
about
and,
that.
you're drinking water at the end of the plant. It was pretty interesting, so. There's a-
That's
Good way
Orange
to
County,
keep,
I
that's a
think.
good way to keep our
Yeah.
reservoir full. We could just
Certainly would be. So, anyway,
It's the same.
yeah. The difference in,
There's a lot of marketing work that's done.
Oh, that's very good.
But you know, I tell you what, you look at that water that comes,
Out of the river.
no, yeah, but I watch the water at the Legends go into those ponds coming out of the Fluent plant all the time. And then you look at the water that's coming out of Harper's River, I guarantee you, I must drink that water coming.
The eye test.
The eye test completely
Yeah.
tells me I like the Fluent water better than Harper's River.
But not everybody would share that. That's what they were trying to get us to think, though.
During the flood, of course, we had water come right up to our discharge point at the wastewater plant, and there was an interface of the treated water with the water in the river, and it was crystal clear, and it just kind of blended in with, of course, what was going in the harbor at the time, and it was pretty, I have some video if anyone's interested, so.
Because all the sewer overflow upstream.
Say sewer, sediment,
Excuse me, yeah.
we've reported all that.
Influent infiltration.
Yes, lots of I&I. The table, we're digressing quickly here.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
Page,
I'm almost ready to make a motion.
Hey,
We're getting close down to staffing now.
yeah, page 18, you'll see an increase in the, what we're requesting is the amended budget for 2011. Again, that is debt service driven. And we, again, are trying to fund the SRF projects for the reclaim distribution system. I think the rest you'll see is pretty consistent with what we had originally. The staffing, as we move forward here, again, we're not requesting any positions for this year. We are projecting within the next 5 years to hire certain staff, but it really depends on the growth of the distribution systems, and the collection system. We don't anticipate additional personnel needs at the treatment facilities. We think any additional personnel would be either regulatory driven or extension of
I saw on
systems.
page 22 that regulatory coordinator.
Right, yes.
But
We
I
had,
noticed it was, marked out for.
Right, we had looked at hiring a regulatory coordinator. We seem to be doing pretty well in that area right now, and a lot of the existing staff members have stepped up and kind of taking a more significant role in that area. So at this point, we wanted to put it off a year. Not sure if we're going to even bring it back in future budgets, but wanted to keep it in there as really a concept. The complexity of the regulatory environment is ever increasing, so.
Yeah, the regulatory component of what we do isn't going anywhere. It's always going to be there. And that highlights that need. So it may be a position at some point. We'll continue to look at that, but it is a big part of what Mark deals with and our team in water works with.
The staffing tables, again, if you have any specific questions, please let me know. Be happy to talk in detail. Well,
I move approval.
During that, I just, the only thing I marked was the TAP and access reserves, but there's not anything to ask about that, I guess. Okay, so is there a second to
I
Richard's
second.
recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Item number 5 then will be consideration of the budget amendment ordinance.
And I'll start it off, but also rely on Russ to talk a little bit about how this would work. As you remember, last year, we did take action, and the state provided the authority for us to change our charter and how we might make budget amendments. And so we wanted to bring that forward. One of the things we're dealing with is, and want to look specifically at, is our ability within the total appropriation to move dollars between departments and do that a little more efficiently. That's particularly true as we have tighter budgets. We've also instituted over the last 2 years the vacancy rates that are in part of those budgets, and sometimes folks, we need to move those because we didn't have turnover where we thought we had it, and we had it more in other places, and as a whole, we think that's a good planning assumption, but it doesn't always play out that every department hits that target, and that's not really, that's by no fault of their own, so we want to be able to work with folks on those sorts of issues, but again, still work within the total appropriation the board's provided us. Russ, do you want to talk a little more about the specific mechanics on how this might work? And we gave you an example of this existing budget we've just completed where we've got, I think, 10 or 11 areas that needed to go up and about 18 that are down below budget. And it just sort of gives you the sense of we have pretty tight budgets, and so you're going to be where you have folks a little bit over, a little bit under, and we want to have the ability to work with those in this process. So,
You know, the way that I think about this is that when you're doing a task, you need to use the right tool to size it to do the task that you're looking at. And in the past, where you had 7 or 8 large departments, there was probably a pretty good reason to not be able to move funds between departments. But now we've broken so many of these departments, as Eric said, into smaller entities, in some cases where we only have 3 or 4 employees. And when you put a vacancy rate in there, or if you move someone on a temporary basis, and that you not only have their salaries and benefits, but maybe you have their vehicle and their fuel expenses and travel expenses and things like that, you take a very small budget and you can either be dramatically under or dramatically over in a very short period of time. And the example that was given to you shows you where we are. And again, these are unaudited numbers, and there's still some other things, some adjustments that we'll probably make before the final numbers come out. But if you notice, you've got several departments here that are over by 8,000, 2,000, 3,000, 2,000, 8,000, 5,000, 43,000, 18, 74, and a couple of big transfers that were over, and then one for 19. I just think you have to really question of whether you want to go back and do a 3-reading amendment just to change those small amount of budget items. I mean, it is clearly your call, and the charter change that went into effect basically said, okay, we're taking that chunk out of the charter. We need to decide how you're going to amend the budget by ordinance now. So we currently have no ordinance that really addresses that. And we wanted to put this out and kind of put it on the table and get you to think a little bit more about how you want to do that. Our suggestion is the draft ordinance. And although I see that we had several grammatical mistakes in there when I was reading it over, in essence, down at the bottom where it says Section 7 and Section 10, those are the sections from the ordinance from the charter that we had before, that basically talks about what the mayor can do up to a certain point within funds. And then the second part, it talks about in department. We would like to see authority left at the fund level. That really gives us I think that gives management the most flexibility to do things. And that involves really moving people, moving vehicles, moving equipment from one place to another. You know, I can give you countless examples of things that have happened in the last couple of years where we've moved someone from a department that was kind of slow, like Building and Neighborhood Services was a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, and you move them to another department. But it's a temporary assignment, so you really don't want to go in and do a budget amendment to move that salary. Well, if the end of the year passes and that person is still in that department, the receiving department, whoever got that employee, is going to be over budget. The other department's going to be under budget, but it's the same money that we budgeted. It's just in the wrong place. And the only way that we can really address that now is to go in and do a budget amendment every time we do a temporary type of change, or we wait like this until the end of the year, and then we've got a
Do
whole
cleanup.
laundry list and do one massive cleanup type of thing. The unfortunate part about it is we're producing statements internally for our departments almost weekly. We do these flash reports that they're looking at, and they live and die by those reports of what have I spent so far and how far along am I during the year. You don't get those reports, but our departments do. And they're skewed because they're all based on, what your budget is. But if we don't amend the budget as we move these people along, then they're really looking at the wrong numbers. They're getting, tainted information, I would say. And again, if budgets weren't so tight, and if people padded the budgets as they may have done years ago, it wouldn't be an issue, because there'd be enough in everybody's budget to handle these little things. But, the old expression is tight as a tick. I mean, we're tight as a tick on these budgets now in these departments. What we have twisted and twisted on almost all of the operating expenses, and we've added things like the vacancy rate and the personnel cost. The only real place that we can move any money now is to defer capital. That's the last the last place that we have to go look for that. So again, I say all of that just to put it in context. I really think you would be giving management the correct amount of flexibility and authority if money could be moved within fund. Again, if there's any hint that it's going to spend more than you've authorized within that fund, it's going to require an ordinance with three readings.
But that fund you're talking about is the general fund, basically, which is absolutely huge, as opposed to a department where at least we have, the board has authorized a certain amount for every department. If you're talking about within funds, I mean, as I say, the general fund covers what? It covers everything except water, wastewater, and maybe those other few little things there. So that saying that you're going to make changes within a fund really basically says you can make any changes, except if it goes to...
Well, it's, the other side of that argument is, as you say, everything is in the general fund, or all the juicy bits are in the general fund. There's not a lot we can do with it, because unless we start laying off personnel, you can't move any of the personnel. The benefits are all tied to the personnel. There's very little flexibility there. Again, unless you're moving on operations and maintenance, the things that we have to move around are vehicle costs, fuel, office supplies, the things like that. And they're all critical to each of the departments. I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to see management moving any large sums around, because it's going to basically strip a department if they did that.
So help me understand what the check and balance is for us as people that
Good.
When's our no session?
versus management. What is that check and balance to make sure that things stay right?
Well, I think you do have, and if I can go ahead, you do get quarterly reports to see where things are going during the year. So you're seeing on an ongoing basis where the money is being spent and what's being done. I think that if you did this at the fund level, what you would want is some kind of a report from management as to what changes are being made. It doesn't mean that the reporting would stop. It just means that you don't need to have three readings to do it.
You're still setting that total appropriation, and we're living within that total appropriation unless we come back to you for a broader budget amendment. This provides us with the ability to work within that appropriation more. What we could do that I don't know is necessarily included in this, but we could look at this as some form of reporting those actions that happen within those appropriate, if we move $10,000 from building and neighborhood services to finance, because we temporarily assigned an employee there for a month or 2 months or something like that to work on a project, we could provide you with that like we provide the actions taken on behalf of the board. That could be, that could be a
But doesn't
A measure that we do.
Doesn't this say you're going to have to do that anyway? This says if you have $10,000 or more,
Mm-hmm.
it's still going to have to be resolution with two
That's if it's done
actions.
that's if it's done within fund. And the part about the departments is really on the second part. I believe.
Okay, but I'm talking about, I thought we were talking about within the fund, though. And so
I hear more that it's within the department.
It is. What we're saying is, when money moves from fund to fund, for example, to increase the transfer to street aid for resurfacing from the general fund, or to debt service or any of those others, that requires an ordinance, period. I think that should stay in place. But it's only when you're moving within departments, within a single fund, which is 99% of the time the general fund, that we would need to do that. What you might want to consider doing is allowing those type of transfers up to a certain amount and set a limit on it. And if it's more than 25,000, or if it's more than whatever the number might be, then require an ordinance of some kind.
Well, let me tell you, we've talked a little bit about this before, and my concern has been that, I still consider that a very important aspect of the elected officials is the oversight of finances. And, I think the citizens hold us accountable. I do not think they necessarily hold staff accountable for that. I think they hold us accountable for that. And actually, one of the issues in the election 3 years ago was that some previous board members and administrations, that they were not overseeing the spending and the handling of finances. And if I can remember, there were ads about that, during the election and everything. So I'm not really sure, kind of what's the big deal about having getting the board approval for the 3 readings. Whenever I found out that it was talking about the general fund, which is really the place that you'd be talking about moving things around, I don't understand what's the big deal about it. Why is there a
That may be
problem?
where a dollar amount, we're talking about things that, it is a more extensive process. It takes, when you talk about 3 readings, you're talking about 6 weeks, 8 weeks to make a change.
Well,
Is that necessary at a certain dollar level? Especially when you look at this chart, you've got a lot of them that are relatively small.
Oh, yeah.
Do we want to go through and do those?
but don't you do them all at the end, just at the end?
Well, that's what we're doing now, because it's such,
So what's the
It-
problem?
it's- it's-
I'm really
yeah,
asking,
yeah.
what's the problem with it?
I guess what I'd say is we end up just sort of waiting it out and just doing it all at the end of the
Okay.
year to clean it up.
Okay.
And we don't really, because it's so cumbersome. So the alternative is that we do it on a more regular basis, on a kind of management, on the management side, inform you, or, communicate at above a certain dollar, but we adjust budgets. We're more agile with them through the year because we can do it more efficiently, I guess.
Well,
And then we come to you on certain levels, or we just report to you on an ongoing basis what adjustments are made, again, within the total appropriation that you've granted. We're not, anytime we get over that, that's a totally different discussion.
Well, yeah, but what's the little wiggle room right now on the general fund? It's huge. So, the chances that you would go over in the general fund are almost nothing. Is that right?
You mean over the total
The total
expenditure,
appropriation.
or over in one of the
No,
20-something
no, I'm
departments?
talking about the total expenditure, because that's the only time it's saying it has to come back to us, is if you're going over the total expenditures, right?
If we're changing the appropriation.
Yeah, so see,
Well, I would say that you spent the better part of 4 months listening to the departments and putting together and working through the budget that we adopt. So there's an enormous time spent on that, and for that reason, it should be rare that we would ever come back to you and ask for you to raise the spending limit for any reason whatsoever. The only case that I can think of is typically if you have positive revenues.
Yeah,
If you see that you're
Good
taking
point.
in more revenue and you
Yes,
decide
yes.
to add some additional expenditures, for example, that is typically the only reason that you come back to on the fund. What we're talking about more is on the day-to-day operations. And to answer your question about why you would want to do it, if you walk back to January or February of this year, maybe it was December, January, February, I bet you had at one time at least 4 different amendments on your BOMA agenda, because you'd be having the first reading on 2 amendments and the second reading on another one and the third reading on another one, because they were coming at you in rapid fire because we were cleaning up the prior year and we were starting to make amendments,
That's right.
for this year. And they start running on top of each other if we made the kind of amendments that are almost required on a weekly basis now, and get them in a place where they become part of the budget reporting that we do for our own internal departments. Again, the problem is if you take and you move 2 people from one place to another, the money for those 2 people is still showing up in the old department. So that department manager is looking at that and he's seeing the reports.
That's not
And,
getting credit.
it looks like he's at 40% of his budget at the end of December. But, really,
But wait,
that money should be
That person
gone.
knows, though, that there's an unusual circumstance there. It's just like we're saying on the water and sewer, they postpone some of their, projected expenditures. I mean, you don't know what's going on. So just because it looks like that, then the director or that person, that supervisor certainly knows the reason for that. And, so it's not like a small thing. I mean, it's not like they're over budget on office supplies or something. I mean, so if it's a big one, they're going to know about it anyway. And so even if it doesn't look good to them, I mean, they know the reality of it. I don't know. I just can't, I don't see the great benefit, because at the end, most of them are going to be just very minor anyway. And so it seems like most of the time, we take care of them at the end.
And that's what we're doing now. But if, under the current rules, if they're even $1 over, we have to do an amendment.
But wait, we haven't been doing that. We have not been doing that, have we? Except that we cleaned it
We'll go
up at
through
the
and do
end.
this kind of thing at the end of the year,
Which
which will be anybody who's over is in
So what's the
the
problem with that?
increased column.
I mean, what's the problem with doing it at the end of the year the way we've been doing it?
So are you worried about accountability for those budgets, that there are things that, a personnel change that maybe some people actually don't know that?
Well, they may know,
Is
but
it,
when we transfer someone from one department to another, does the vehicle go with them? How much is that going to be? Do we need to transfer the vehicle to the other department? Do we need to transfer all the money that we had in there for them attending association meetings and their gas and oil and,
In any budget you do is always a snapshot in time. It's what we thought was the
Sure.
right thing in,
Absolutely.
May of the previous year, and we do the best to manage with it. I guess the question is, how much do we want to be able to adjust it? Because the reality of the process we have now is it's not worth going through and making the adjustments until really the end of the year. So that's what we do, and we just do a cleanup kind of like this, which is okay, but do we want to have the ability to be a little more flexible in making those changes on an administrative, some level of administrative authority, so we can adjust a budget and it's, at the middle of the year, more reflective of our reality than what we thought at the beginning of that budget? that's kind of the struggle we have is, are we able to make those adjustments, or when do we need to go to the board? And half the time, most of the time, we just don't do it, because it's not worth going through and making that
There's
adjustment.
not enough money to be concerned about. But-
Have we had notations from audits on this, that this
No.
might be a problem?
Never.
No.
No, because we cleaned it up.
That's
And
right.
I guess, is there better accountability to you if we're actually making the more minor adjustments through the year to make the budget reflect true operations and reporting that to you, as opposed to saying, yeah, that's the thing you adopted at the beginning of the year, but that's not necessarily the way we're operating today.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's the tension here, and I hear what you're saying about, you are ultimately the ones accountable for the financial condition of the city and how we operate and work within that. We work very hard to serve you well in that regard, but you are the ones accountable for it. So we want to make sure you are involved in the way you want to be involved, and seeing what the activities are that are going on to make that budget work. And we're really trying to do this in a way that the budgets are more reflective of what we do through the year, as opposed to doing it one massive cleanup at the end of the year. There's probably always going to be some cleanup at the end of the year. That's the reality.
yeah.
You will always have some of that. And if there's some way that we could do it to be a little more, responsive in doing it, but still provide you with the information you need to feel like you're in the loop, I think that's what we're trying to figure out a way to do. This may not be the best way to do it. It's an idea of how to do it. But, and maybe that's a conversation to continue to have about what you want to see to reach the, kind of the balance point that we're trying to get at, where we are flexible enough, but you feel like you're seeing what you need to see.
Could you do something like, when things are done on behalf of the board, that you give us some kind of monthly on that?
Well, the other question is,
Without adopting a charter change on this? Could you not do that, then that would build into the end of the year amendment?
Well, like to have
Well, the
three
one
reading
point I'd
ordinance.
like to make is,
That may-
I think you need to pass something, because
Something
we
needs to
did
be
amend
passed.
the charter to say that the way in which you amend the budget shall be determined by ordinance.
So we now need an ordinance.
Yeah, we now need an ordinance.
The ordinance
So-
could be, keep doing what we've been
That's
doing for
right.
years, or the ordinance could be, keep
Change
this
it.
part, but provide some authority within a dollar amount to make adjustments, or report those adjustments on a quarterly basis, or, yeah, there are all variety of things we could do, but we do need some kind of ordinance
I think we do.
to provide a description of what that mechanism is.
My question is 25 a good ceiling?
okay, I've got a question. How many personnel are switching back and forth during the year? Or switching, period, during the year? We've had more of that probably the last year or two. would
Yeah,
you
last 2
say,
years we've done more.
Than we've ever done, or we've done in recent years. But are we talking about 20 people, or 2, or, you see what I'm saying?
Somewhere in between. I'd say somewhere between 6 and
Maybe
10,
10.
probably.
Yeah.
Where this would really, I think, kick in is if we ever get to the point where police divides up their budget. And instead of having one police budget, it's broken down by departments or divisions within there.
Yeah.
And if you
They've
talk-
resisted
yeah.
that.
But they could still be one department.
And
with
if you
two
talk about
divisions.
police and fire, the
Yeah.
10 positions probably doesn't matter as much, but
That's
if
right.
it's somebody shifting between HR and finance, that actually, in the picture of their small budgets, that does mean
That could be
something.
a 20%
But-
move.
And that's in part why finance had a fairly large increase, because of a position shift. So that is an example that is kind of real that we see.
How many of those, you think we're going to continue to have 10 people a year?
That's so hard to say,
It
is.
because people, I think, are more mobile even within departments now. They do seek, when we advertise internally for positions.
I know people that have had several different
And we've actually,
positions here.
and that has become more of our reality. We've even defined a process more internally to deal with temporary assignments. You may have seen
Yeah,
that
I
we
saw
did
that.
that. Because at first, especially when I first started here, that was just sort of, oh, we're just doing this for a little while in this one case. Well, one sort of begat another, but they made sense. And when you have an organization that has 50-plus vacancies that you're not filling anymore, you gotta be a little more flexible. But we also wanted to have more of a defined process so people could express interest, could know about them, and be a part of that. So it has become a little more of what we do as a, kind of in our culture of as an organization. So I think it's gonna be part of our reality. Will it be as much? I don't know. It will depend.
It depends, if I may, a lot on what the economy does.
Yeah.
You know, if we have to continue to look for ways to cut costs, you know, it may continue for longer than we think.
Well, I'm eager to make things easier for y'all to be responsive, and I also want to see more reflective of ongoing operations. So I think I would like to see at least move forward to the board level and with a cap of $25,000, and I would make that motion.
Discussion, if this is a factor of our economic times, because things are so tight now, could we somehow put some sort of sunset clause to get us through this time?
I don't see one now.
If I might add to my motion that it'll sunset in 2 years.
Is that long enough?
Well, I mean, that's,
And you may want to do it that way just because we're kind of trying this in some ways
Yeah,
too. You
try it
may
and
want
see
to
if
do
you
it for
like it.
1 year and we come back in a year and look at how this worked. The other point, you may want to have us do a reporting process regardless of the level, just so that you see what we're doing. And we provide that report on either a monthly or quarterly basis about anything that happens. I don't know how many.
I'll add that to it, that we have a quarterly report.
Okay.
And,
Well, let me ask you, what about just having that and let us trying that before we change our charter?
Charter's already
We've
changed.
already
No,
moved.
but it doesn't have...
You'd just be providing an ordinance that covers how you do
But then this
amendments.
does go into the charter, because I looked at what the charter said, and it did not say what we were looking at here.
sunset in 2 years,
But that's now been removed
quarterly report.
officially. That came back from the legislature, if you remember.
Yeah, we did that
in May, I
earlier this
believe.
year. Yeah,
Okay, well, it's still,
So we've got-
it's still on our...
Right.
probably right now.
Yeah.
Could I restate my motion?
Okay.
Just
You
make sure I
didn't get a
got everything.
second, so your motion never got a second, so you might as well.
That's right, we've talked about this.
Shoot a freelance in here.
My motion was to approve this with the amendments that it would sunset it within 2 years, and there'd be a $25,000 cap, and we'd have quarterly reports reflecting those
Any
changes.
actions taken?
I'll second that.
Is there any more discussion? I can't support it. I think that we ought to continue the way we're doing, because I don't really see a real problem with that. But generally speaking, the amounts are very small, and that cleaning it up once a year seems to me to be very effective.
Although the quarterly reporting may provide you with more information than you have now in terms of what's going on. You actually may see more. You may see more, because what we tend to do now is just say, it'll work out.
Yeah.
And to the extent it doesn't work out, then we come to you with one big motion. So you actually may get more detail than you get now.
Am I
in some ways.
assume that the quarterly reporting comes to the finance committee only?
I would approach it like we do the actions taken on behalf of the board, that you see a report of what happened
On behalf of, okay.
within that authority.
Okay.
And then, so you know, if we move $5,000 between finance and HR, you would see that. You would see that reported to you.
Okay.
I call the question.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any, should we just say, if there's no other discussion? Because if you call the question, I have to vote.
Yeah, now we have to vote on the question.
I mean, we have to vote on calling the question.
That would take.
Let's vote.
All in favor of the
Once
motion?
2 to 1, I already know.
Well, let's hear it. All in favor? All opposed? No. Okay, we are going to item number 6, which is the auto allowance policy.
Are you done?
He's had enough.
You ready to go?
This is like the ghost of Christmas past. We did the
Yeah, we're cleaning up a few things this time around.
the budget ordinance came to you before. We also talked once before about auto allowances, and I would couch it in the same terms as the budget ordinance. The goal here is, 1, to save money, and 2, to be nimble, and allow us to be able to be flexible with some of the things that we have. You know, currently, we have a lot of vehicles that we've put off replacement on. We will be having to replace those for some people that have take-home vehicles. We would like to have the opportunity to offer them some kind of an auto allowance in lieu of replacing those and having company cars. The company cars are very expensive. It's not like the old days where you bought one and, you know, it cost $10,000 and it lasted forever. They are very expensive. We put some background information. The spreadsheet is something that I did based on 2008 numbers. The Memphis Business Journal AAA article is for 2009 numbers. You can see that there's some disparity there. But I think the overall goal, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, is to give the city administrator the authority to go up to some figure that would entice someone to give up a city vehicle in lieu of providing their own vehicle and having us pay an allowance instead of. We do have, I think, 4 people that are on an auto allowance.
We've probably got, 21 or 22 that are probably in the group where we kind of got into a habit where in certain positions, management positions, a vehicle came with the position. We don't really want to look at it that way so much anymore. So we'd like to look at these 22 and in particular and explore, is an auto allowance a better option for the city and potentially for the employee as well? But the reality is what we've got in terms of auto allowance authority is a $200 a month number, which is probably not a number enough to make that be something someone would consider that's got an existing vehicle. And when you look at the cost we have, say if we take that group of 22 and we cut that in half, that's probably about $250,000 worth of capital investment, plus the ongoing maintenance that we've got to bear, that I think an auto allowance that's a little more competitive would wipe that out and make that probably a better deal for us and something that the employee might consider and view more favorably.
And that's something that's going to take a year to track it, maybe longer than that,
Yeah.
because you got to get rid of the cars gradually.
This would be something we'd really kind of look at and step into gradually as we went through and looked at what was ready for replacement in particular and say, do we need to replace this vehicle or do we need to look at another option? And, there are going to be some positions that always make sense, a supervisor in streets or whatever, they're going to need to have a vehicle. But other positions, maybe not so much. And so that's what we'd like to have the ability to do. We can make it real simple and just do a dollar amount as the general number and change the 200 to a different flat amount, or you can give me a range of authority. We probably want to, the more you look at it, you probably want to just deal with everybody in a similar manner so that it's not, let's make a deal with everyone. So you probably want a fairly uniform amount. When you did my employment contract, you provided 400. I don't know if you want to use that as a benchmark. I don't know if there's other guidelines to look at. I'm kind of looking at what a comfort level is as well.
Well, I guess what I'd ask is there a litmus test on who
I was going to say.
would need to have access to a
That's
car
right.
that the city would provide?
I thought, could we get a list of the positions that have these, of the auto allowances and the city vehicles, period? I mean, I'd just like to know what positions have those. And I have a question. What would the reason that the city employee would prefer to get an auto allowance and a personal vehicle? if it's gonna save us money, it sounds like it's gonna cost the employee more money. I mean, it can't be, it's gonna almost be a zero-sum game.
Yeah, but they may want to drive their own car.
They might have more flexibility in having their own
They
vehicle.
want to
give you a
drive
great-
a Porsche.
Let me give you a
No,
great,
that's what I'm asking. I'm asking, what
Yeah.
are the reasons? What are the
let me give you a
reasons?
great example.
Okay.
You've got two teenagers, and you want to leave straight from work and go to the ball games that they go at, and you want to be able to pick up them and their friends and carry them home or so to a restaurant after the game, and you don't want to go in a city vehicle. You
Well,
know,
the city
we
vehicle's got the
actually-
name.
Well, we
the
actually
city on there?
forbid some use of
Government
personal
plates and all
use
that.
for the city vehicle. So there are some people who would be happy to do that in exchange, just because of their particular circumstance.
Well, and as an example, if you have two children, they can't drive a city vehicle, but
That's
they
true.
could drive
Your personal
your
vehicle.
personal vehicle.
Yeah.
What's the IRS?
That's exactly what's going on with me.
What's the IRS allowing on a,
Well, now, wait,
on a
you've got an
per mile.
allowance though, so.
Yeah, that's why it works for me, because I have that
Yeah, it works for you.
flexibility.
It works for
That's what I like about it, because it's,
Because otherwise, you'd only have one car.
Right.
And when your
and I don't
daughter
think,
starts
I want my
driving-
daughter doing her test driving in a city vehicle, so.
50 cents a mile is what they do, so we would have to track mileage and figure out, that's what the IRS limitations would be. You know, the
so
people
anything
that,
over that, you're having to report that as income anyway.
the people that do have a city vehicle are already charged $3 per working day and have to pay taxes on that amount, even though they're allowed to do the car without reimbursing the city. At the end of the year, we have to gross up their salary for that amount, and they end up having to pay taxes on that amount. So they're paying something already for the use of that vehicle. So, you know, that takes some of the sting out of doing that.
But then if you gross up their salary though, then it goes on their salary for Social Security, for retirement.
It doesn't count for retirement. I don't know if it counts for Social Security or not, but that's one thing that does not count for retirement. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's a great idea to move away from having all this city fleet, and, because there are now vehicles available for people to take out and so on. I just don't know that I know what that reimbursement rate should be. I can't give you that number. It'd just be something I threw out there off the top of my head, and whether 400 is too much or, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd like to see a little better documentation on kind of what the range should be.
Okay.
And I'm willing to give you that flexibility. I just don't know what the
What the
number
right
is
place
for
to
the
be is.
flexibility. I'd just be guessing.
And again, this, instead of this being a perk, I see that it's a true need for the employee. You know, that if you give them just a 200 a month and there's no test of how many miles per month you drive, then that's a perk.
Well, I think you've got two different issues here. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Part of what you're saying is, should some of these people not have a city vehicle? What I think I hear you saying.
I'd just like to hear what they are. I mean, they may all be perfectly worthy, and other people may be too. I don't know.
But, I mean, for example, I'll just add myself as an example. I don't have a city vehicle, and I get a $200 a month allowance, but I don't drive that many miles. So it might cost me $500 or $600 or $800 to have a car, but I would not be driving that on
the
city
city, yeah, I
business.
see what you
The
mean.
$200 is an appropriate amount. But for people who are driving out in the field every day, going back and forth to stops, you know, it's going to have to be a lot more than that, you know, to make that trade-off. If you noticed under the options, one of the suggestions that I made, and this was strictly my suggestion, was to, at least on a test period, go up to $500 a month, or 50% of the total cost of ownership. If it's a small vehicle and we can determine what the cost of ownership is, that it's, you know, $600 a month, then we would only be able to give up to half of that to an employee. But that was just simply That was
then
my
again-
wild guess as far as doing that.
Yeah.
Well, my question then is for this maximum of 5, how do we justify that as opposed to somebody else?
Well-
It's got to be on a usage
Yes,
basis.
that's right.
If someone has a city vehicle now, we know exactly what they're driving. I mean, we know how
Yeah.
many miles they're driving. We've got years of history, so,
But then again, were they doing that all on city business too?
well, we don't
See?
know, but,
That's a
you know,
question
we've got a pretty good indication, again, for example, if you take all of our inspectors,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
we can go across the board and average it and come up with something that we think is pretty realistic, I think.
So do you think,
But would a city inspector want
wouldn't,
to
I agree.
drive his personal vehicle?
Well, he may want to drive his personal vehicle to work and then get in the truck.
Which is
that
more what we
have.
do with the building and neighborhood services
But it
inspectors.
seems
do
like
that.
those people wouldn't be
That's what we do.
eligible for the
They don't get
allowance.
allowance.
They're not in
No.
that, they're not
No,
in
they
that
do
category.
not.
There's no allowance.
No. Do they take, well, wait, let me ask you the question.
Yep.
Do those people take the city vehicle home with them?
No,
So,
not the inspectors,
I see
not
some-
the codes folks. They
That's
come in
right.
and use a vehicle.
So
use a
they
pool
wouldn't
vehicle.
they wouldn't really fit into this anyway, would they?
That's a place we've kind of, yeah, adjusted that. What we're looking at is really more managers that have been granted vehicles over time as part of the position.
So they're like
And
26?
if that makes sense, or should we move towards this model?
I think we had 21 or
21,
22.
22, something.
Oh, does that include
On
the
the
four
last
people
list.
with the auto allowance?
No.
So there are 26 total that the city is subsidizing in some way or
There's
the
either a
other.
vehicle with the
Right.
position, or there's, yeah, allowance.
I'd like to just see a little more information.
How about we bring this back with that
Yeah.
list,
I
agree. I
and
agree.
maybe give you some more ranges of examples of what other people
Yeah.
are doing,
Yeah.
what's in
And
the
also a little
market.
more idea of what
Yeah.
the vehicle usage is and who gets them.
Yeah, just the positions of the people that have it would be very helpful too.
It'd be nice to eliminate that as a capital cost.
Yeah,
Would.
long-term, we need to find ways to own fewer vehicles and maybe have more of a city pool that then gets used as
Now, let me
there's
ask you
appropriate.
this, how is the fuel, I mean, the city obviously pays for the gas in some of the cars, and some of them they don't. How does that work? I mean, maybe that's something that you bring back to us too.
Well, the city
On city
cars, we pay
vehicles.
for all the fuel, all the maintenance.
So in
Because it's
other words,
our vehicle.
It's our vehicle. We've got to take care
Now,
of it.
somebody paying allowance, that's their deal to handle that.
So nobody with an allowance gets city fuel.
We just want to be fair,
They
whatever that
shouldn't.
allowance is.
If they do, I want to know about it.
well, but on the other side though is that, you know, is it going, who can it be a better deal for? You know, what I'm trying to say there. So I think that's something else. I mean, if we're going to be doing this, I think we need more information. Is that-
Yeah,
is that-
I
I'd
think
love
to
to be a
not-
city employee, and I would take the $200 a month right now.
Better than
Because
what
I
we
just walk
get.
across the street.
Yeah, for Ken. To not own a vehicle is always, I think, going to be that's a better option for us long-term, is to own fewer vehicles. This is a way to try to do that.
Absolutely.
And so we'll provide you that information, though, that we talked about and discuss this next month.
Okay, that is agreeable with everyone, right? Just bring this back. Okay, and the rest of these are reports.
And unless you have questions, they're strictly for your information. The one thing that I would just point out very briefly, the fuel hedging report is now final. The model debt policy is, and we've talked about that in other committee meetings, is the revised comptroller's debt policy.
And it just seems like it's really talking about conflicts or ethics mostly.
He's cut it
I
down
couldn't really see, there
to
wasn't
3
much
pages.
anything else
That's
in
right.
there.
We are in the process of making sure that our policy does hit all of the bullet points that they have in there. Transit grants is just, that comes up from time to time, so we gave you some information because we had finished those for the fiscal year. The sales tax report you already
And I
had.
want to tell you, though, this was down 0.9% from the actual
Last year.
last year. It's more than that from our budgeted amount, though.
Correct.
Yes, it
And that
is.
needs to be put on there next time whenever that comes in.
The other thing to consider is where we were at the middle of the year, which is around 6 or 7% down. So these last 5 months really did
Are
close
better.
that gap to get us almost to a flat year.
But wait, no, that's flat compared
A
to
flat year.
a year ago.
A flat year.
Not compared to our budgeted amount.
Yeah, we're not talking budget, we're saying
That's right,
flat.
that's right. And I'd just like to see
Yes.
that amount, because that did come in there too. I was gonna do it myself, and then
Again,
Yeah,
for
it's a
what-
couple percent.
For what it's
Yeah.
worth,
More.
we followed the guidance of the State Funding Board, who had some, all the smart economists from across the state say basically that we're going to have a flat second half of 2009, and then a pickup in the first half of 2010. And they got the 2010 part right.
Yeah, they did, they really did.
So they were half right.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone really expected the July through December period to put us in as deep a hole as we have. Item E is the preliminary results for 2010. Again, they are incomplete, but they're pretty doggone close. So, again, those are unaudited numbers. They're for you to look at when you have some time.
I've looked at them,
The
but
good news is,
talk about it, I can't.
the good news is we were $3 million under budget on expenses. And the bad news is we were
Still,
$3 million plus a little bit
Plus,
more
yeah.
under on revenue.
That's
So
right, that's right.
we're going to come in right about where we thought we would, but much like on Mark's water budget, we got there in a different path than we thought we would. And the last one, item number F, is just something, this is a topic that's been discussed at the last two GFOA conferences. And I bring it to you because the person that's involved in producing that particular piece that I gave you is very well thought of. He's a retired finance officer from Oregon, and he's established a lot of programs across the country and set investment policies for people. He doesn't want to invest our money for us. What he does typically is consult with people to work on their policies and then do the RFP for them to find someone that will do professional investment advice. It's hard to imagine in this interest rate environment why we would give up 10 basis points or 8 basis points, whatever it might be, for professional advice to invest our money. And gosh, we think we do such a great job with our existing staff. But the reality is, other cities have found that they have been able to increase their yield and reduce their risk by using professional people because they have access to the market and all of the information. These are not the traditional people the names that you hear around here. These are Federated Investors and Fidelities and Chandler Asset Management. I mean, these are companies that specialize in government work that would probably be the bidders on this. But I'd like to bring this up at another time because when interest rates come back, and it looks like that's going to be farther and farther out, but at some time in 2012 or thereafter, when the interest rates come back, this will probably be an important topic. And to really go through the procedure, we need to start now if we really want to think about doing this. This would save staff time. We have a lot of staff time that's spent on watching the investments because we went through a couple of year period there where we were spending all of our reserves on capital projects. Now we've issued the bonds and replenished that money. So we have all the water and sewer tap monies, we have all of the general fund reserves, and we have some bond money that we haven't spent yet. So, I mean, we have $50 to $60 million on a daily basis that we have to invest. And we're doing it, as much as we can with local banks and local CDs, but, they're not paying anything.
paying
So,
anything.
we're having to look elsewhere in safe places and within our investment policy, but we're not as nimble and as good as a professional manager would be. So I think it would be worth the exercise to get someone to do a search for us and come back with RFPs with hard bids of what they would do and for how much. And we'll bring that back maybe next time.
Yeah,
Something to
well,
think about.
Everybody's looking for these three things personally as well as for the
Yes, and it's,
government.
it's as difficult an environment to invest as I think anyone has ever seen.
And by the way, I haven't read this yet, but it might be of interest to the entire board to get that article that's in the Wall Street Journal today about the pension.
Pensions.
Yeah.
I'm sending that to you
Yeah.
later today.
Yeah.
Pension from Wall Street
And
Journal.
it's saying,
Yes, it's another gloomy
that's
pension
right,
article.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, and we are going to put the pension on for discussion next Tuesday. We think we have enough time in that meeting to at least put a good dent in that discussion. We wanted to run you the examples of the options we were looking at last time we talked, so we did go ahead and
Definitely send that.
move that on to Tuesday, so that'll get you ready.
And so when will that be, when will the information be available? I mean, the documents to us for Tuesday?
They're out there now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
And that pension presentation is in your packet, too.
Very good. Okay, is there anything else? That's all in favor, say aye, or just leave. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.